And welcome to the second segment on this edition of Grow Big Red. I'm John Fesh with Nebraska Extension.
And I'm Scott Evans with Nebraska Extension.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about protecting newly planted trees and shrubs, but also just small ones in general that can get damaged by a variety of forces throughout the winter. Scott, I always think about rodents and critters, not necessarily rodents, but squirrels and rabbits.
Yes, all sorts of four-legged friends that might be out and about. Right now we're getting lots of phone calls about raccoons.
Yeah, anything that is out there looking for a meal to eat. Sometimes we can have our newly planted trees and shrubs or even bulbs and perennials be that food, and we really don't want that to happen. So over the years we've accumulated a lot of things that work well for protecting these newly planted, newly installed materials, and some things that maybe don't work all that well. It's probably the one that I grew up with and know the best and have seen around. Scott used to work in a garden center. I'm sure you probably sold this as a product.
We sold a lot of tree wrap,
yeah.
And it does a great job, but can you tell us a little bit more? What is the purpose of the tree wrap?
Yeah, so let's talk about it. The idea here is that this is going to be kind of an interception or kind of a go-between, an interface between the tree and the person, or not the person, the critter that's trying to eat it. And for that purpose, this is pretty thin. You know, this is paper thin. It's not going to serve that purpose very well. What it would do would be to reflect some winter sun. And so for that purpose, it probably would be helpful, because sometimes the sun baking on a newly planted tree or shrub can be injurious. So for that purpose, it can work pretty well.
Right, and we don't think about that during the winter. It might be 2 or 12 degrees outside, but that sunlight hitting the surface of the bark of the tree can really rapidly warm it up, and that can cause some damage to the tree.
Yeah, and that can fluctuate. So it could be 20 degrees outside, but on that tree bark itself, it could be above freezing. And then, of course, diurnally, if that's a verb, at nighttime, it's going to drop below freezing, and that happens over and over again, day after day after day. That bark starts to kind of shrink and slough off and bake off. So you want some kind of a wrapping around the tree to reflect that, especially on the thin bark trees. There are so many of the newer maples that are sold, and they all have very thin bark.
Yes, the autumn blaze maple, which is one of America's top-selling tree, great-looking tree, but that bark is really thin. And the green spire linden is another tree that has a really thin bark.
So you're going to need to use something there to protect it, at least for the first few years. So for that protection, it works pretty well. For actual physical protection against something chewing on it, not so good. Another thing that gives you a little bit of pause is that as you wrap this around a tree, let me just pretend here with this. If we're going to wrap this around a tree, you start thinking about pretending this is a tree, obviously. You start thinking about, well, wait a minute, that's a great place for insects to hide over the winter. So our entomology friends tell us, you know, it's a great place for borers and other critters to hide over the winter. So this product is kind of good and not so good depending on what you're going to be using it for.
What time of the year would we recommend putting this around the tree?
So typically it would be after you're done mowing the lawn for the summer and for the fall. I would generally say that around Thanksgiving, and so any time now would be a good time to do that. You're trying to reflect that warm winter sun. Something that works a little better would be something like this. Now, if I show this side to the camera, you might recognize this as something you would attach to a downspout or put into a place where you want to drain out some water, maybe a retaining wall or a planter box or something like that. And so this is, I think, just called perforated PVC pipe. You can see small little perforations in it, so it works well for that purpose. But this material, unlike the paper, this material is very, very tough, very hard, and so it makes a much better protector for new trees and shrubs. Now, you think about, well, how am I going to get that around the tree? You need some sort of device like a ripper or a Dremel tool or something like that, and then you just cut it the vertical length of the pipe, and then open it up. Sometimes you might need to do this with a friend.
Yes, yes.
Open it up enough to wrap that around the tree itself. And then it just sort of closes back up easily. Or if you need to use a cable tie or something to kind of tie that back up. That works out pretty well in terms of being a protector. So from physical. Then after that, you want to again use the purpose or the function of the tree wrap and have that winter sun be reflected. So just paint it with some white paint, or I didn't have any white paint, so I had to use kind of this almond colored paint because I couldn't find my white paint. But anything light would work out really well and be much better than the black side, which is actually going to absorb the sun. So something like this is a pretty decent tree wrap, even though it's not originally meant for that purpose, and they're pretty inexpensive.
Right. And it's something that it's easy to do. Something like this, you might need some help with a friend because that plastic is pretty tight. But what you want to do is make sure that you don't put it around the tree and forget about it.
That's true, because trees do grow and trees do get in the way. Some of that tree growth can get in the way. The other thing is, Scott asked earlier, we talked a little bit earlier, when to put that on. And typically we would use the holiday schedule there, put it on at Thanksgiving, take it off at Easter. When the trees start budding and start growing again, we want to get this off. And we certainly don't want to go through the winter with having the benefits and then leaving it on over the summer. Even painted white, it's going to attract a lot of heat. So we want to let that breathe and take it off right around the middle of April or so.
Right. Because that's going to also hold a lot of high humidity. It's going to make a nice microclimate where we can get some fungi or bacteria that could actually do more damage than good to the plant.
On the bark, yeah. So this we would put right down to the ground and maybe even an inch or so into the ground, and then have it go up. Typically to the first set of branches, it would be about where you want to keep that. And that's going to keep all sorts of critters and other kind of, even children.
Yes.
Even ne'er-do-well juvenile delinquents would keep them off of it as well. A product that commonly is sold, and again, with your experience from the garden center, would be the folks that live on acreages often have a problem with deer.
Yes, deer can do a lot of damage very quickly to our trees and shrubs. And some of the repellents out there actually just make your hands stink more than they do any good for the plant.
Yeah. This is one of the newer products. We're actually testing this one. Its claims to be season-long control. And from what you and I know about these products is that they're usually effective for about a couple days or maybe up to a week at the most. They sometimes have an odor repellent, sometimes kind of a sticky, oily residue that they leave on a plant. But we're hoping that we do get a little bit more out of this one, but we're not holding our breath by any means. If you did have one plant that was super, super important to you, like it was a memorial plant or something like that, we're not saying don't use it. We're just saying really lower your expectations for its results.
Right. And follow and read the instructions. It will tell you how often that you need to apply it. But keep in mind that if we have a lot of snow cover this winter, some animals like deer or rabbits will ignore that fight or flight response that some of these products will initiate and still feed on the plant because they're not 100% protective.
Another device that you have there is chicken wire. And chicken wire really will serve the same kind of purpose. Now, again, it doesn't exclude everything. This would do a good job for rabbits and squirrels, but not very good for mice. Mice are going to be able to get through the chicken wire. That's why something like this would do a good job for all of them. But it may not be feasible in some locations. Like, it would be hard to put this around a shrub.
Right.
Or a multi-stem shrub. It's going to be hard to do that. For something like that, that would probably work pretty well. You could get it around a multi-stem shrub. Typically, we use those in vegetable gardens in the summertime because it really helps to keep rabbits out. Rabbits, #1 pest in a vegetable garden.
Yes.
And really does a good job of keeping that away. So a lot of this is around protection. Also, another way to look at protection is setting the plant up for the success in the root system. And the first thing we do there is just water the plant thoroughly. Now this year we've been fortunate in that we've had several good rains to hydrate the roots of the plant. But if we do get into a time when it gets a little bit warm and windy and dry, not a bad idea just to go out with a gallon or two of water and put around the newly planted roots to really give them a little drink.
What about if the ground is frozen? Should you still go out there and water?
Well, you might want to do that, but only water lightly, because you could actually be suffocating the plant by cutting off oxygen from the plant. And then of course, if the ground is frozen, it will eventually have periods of time when it warms up enough to the point where it can accept the water. So paying attention to the meteorologist is always a good idea when it comes to
Yes.
these kind of plants. Once that's in place,
Yeah.
then once you've done that, this is a good idea here with the wood chips. The wood chips will do a couple things. First of all, again, they're going to reflect a little bit of heat, but they're also going to hold in moisture on the top of that new root system. Now, we're not talking about thick level of these wood chips, probably just an inch or so, really.
Inch, maybe 2 inches of wood chip mulch. Something that you definitely want to avoid are mulch volcanoes. You might see those around town.
All right, describe a mulch volcano. Let's use this as the tree. You go
Right.
ahead and describe the mulch volcano.
It's literally where we have 6 to 8 inches of mulch piled up against the trunk of the tree. And we might think it's doing something beneficial, but we can actually kill the tree quicker with those mulch volcanoes.
Well, again, it's this natural tendency to try to do everything you can, kind of that tender loving care kind of thing that people have. You know, I think inside us, to a lesser or greater degree, all of us have this kind of nurturing quality about us, and that's one of the things. It just seems like if I put, you know, if the label or John and Scott's recommendation is to put on 1 inch or 2 of mulch, I'll put on 7 inches of mulch. And really, too much of a good thing there is a problem. Too much of a good thing is a problem. Because really what happens then is it holds in too much water and cuts off any oxygen exchange that might be going on.
Right, and if it's too deep, we can also get some rodents like a vole or a mouse that can actually take up residence inside that mulch.
It's a great haven for those kind of four-legged creatures. And then also the size. Sometimes people will just put on mulch that is powder fine and very, very fine. That actually is a bit of a problem too because it holds in more moisture than we want. You know, just nice 1 to 2 inch size chunks work out really well for that purpose. All right, so protecting plants is a good idea, especially the ones you've just put in. A lot of people do, you know, fall is for planting, so there's a lot of trees and shrubs being planted in the fall. We've talked about protecting them with PVC pipe, with the sisal craft paper. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about the chicken wire. We talked about making sure they go into the winter hydrated, full of water. And then, of course, keeping a little bit of that in there over the winter itself. And then maybe this product that's a little bit dubious.
Yes. But if you have any questions about your winter care of your landscape, please give us a call. You can reach us at 402-444-7804. John or I can help you out. We also have master gardeners that'd be more than happy to answer those questions.
Or you could just stop on by and show us pictures from your iPad or your iPhone. And we do that all the time now. That's kind of the latest trend, is just people showing us all these photos, and that really helps us out figure out exactly what's going on. Well, we sure hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Grow Big Red, and check us out on the internet at that website, as well as check us out at the Extension office. Thanks for watching.